All right, great. Of course. Awesome. Okay, let's get started by doing some quick introductions. My name is Dan Yonner. I'm the product manager of the Credhub team.
I'm Isabel Rettelmeyer. I am an engineer on the Credhub team. And this mic was not on.
Perfect. We got both mics working. So another part of the introduction, of course, is we are part of the team, but it's just one small part of the greater team. We've got 6 full-time engineers. I'm one of the PMs, and Aloka is also a consulting PM on the team. These are all pivotal people, but we are an open source team, so we look forward to anyone that's interested in this subject matter contributing team members in the future. And of course, we've got 20 emeritus team members, so as things go, people rotate in and out, so we've got a lot of collective brain power aiming to solve these problems. All right, so just to give a quick summary of what we're going to go over in the next hour. Maybe it won't take an hour, we'll see. So the first part of it, I'm going to go over some of the product goals, why we care to solve the problems that we're attacking. Of course, talk about the question of why did we build something new to solve these problems as opposed to using something that currently exists. Quick intro of sort of the application architecture and a description of that. And then we're going to jump into some specific use cases and demos of what currently exists. My sort of intention for this talk is if you're so inclined and you're interested in this implementation, that after this talk you would know how to go into your environment, set it up, be able to deploy it tomorrow. So once we've done that, we'll just cover quickly some future items and do Q&A. Q&A seems a bit unnecessary considering the size of the group, so feel free as we go through these things to raise your hand, let us know if you have any questions. We'll be happy to stop as we're going through these and address any questions that you have. All right, so let's talk about product goals. 10,000 foot view before we get into anything product specific. I also like to call this very affectionately my Justin Smith slide. So 10,000 foot view of credentials is they leak, and it's bad when they leak. So at the sort of base of anything that we do with Credhub, we operate under the assumption that leaked credentials can be catastrophic. So one of the things that we do is we try to attack all these different methods of like reducing exposure, allowing them to be rotated, not exposing them at all if you don't need to, generating these things automatically with unique values, all of that stuff, so that we reduce the chance that a credential that exists in our management gets leaked. Or if it does, we can rotate it quickly so that it's not catastrophic. All right, so let's talk about product goals. If you're an operator, these 3 screens should be somewhat familiar to you. The first product goal is reducing the surface area of credentials in plain text across the platform. So the first one on the left, of course, is manifest. So if I'm deploying something, I'm going to see my money printing machine, and I'm going to see the credentials to log in as admin to that money printing machine and do whatever I want. So somebody's got to deploy that, but we obviously don't want the operator to have all of the credentials to be able to do everything they want just because of the fact that they want to deploy these systems. On the right, let's assume that this is an operator that isn't deploying the thing, but does have access to BOSH. You could easily do a BOSH manifest into grab password, and there are all of your passwords, which makes this all sad. And then finally at the bottom, of course, we have VCAP services. So once we get into the application container, we've got this great workflow where you can bind your application to a service, and by necessity, that bind has credentials. So if we go into that application environment, we can do the same thing, get the same credentials, and we're set again. All right, so next point, beyond trying to attack that general problem of plain text credentials existing throughout the platform, is creating this idea of a central point of control. A central point of control for generation, storage, rotation, logging, access control. That's a whole list of things. So I'll jump through some of these quickly to just sort of tell you why that matters. So generation, first one is operational. If I've got a Cloud Foundry deployment and I have 90 credentials, somebody's got to generate those things, and you don't want it to be you. So we can operationalize this in a way that you just spec out what those credentials are, you hit deploy, and it just works. That's a win for everyone. Next is compliance-related concerns. So one of the things that we recently went through is removing SHA-1 hash algorithms for certificate generation. So that, as an implementation detail is pretty minor. You can go in and you can change it. It's not a big deal. The trouble is when you're generating these things in a dozen components, you have to do that a dozen times, and you have to work out the dependencies between them. So central point of control lets you make these decisions once and be assured that you're complying with this because it exists in one place. Same thing, of course, for random number generation and policy enforcement. If you have corporate security policies that say minimum length requirements exist for a certain set of credentials, it will certainly help you if all of those credentials are being generated from a single place. Storage, of course, this could be summarized as encryption is hard. We've got a cryptographer on staff here, and anytime that we think encryption is not hard, we go have a conversation with him, and he sets us straight. So encryption, of course, we need to encrypt all of the things. Algorithms, random number generation, master key storage, all of the things that go along with it. Implementing an encryption system follow with that. Rotation, we want to rotate all of the things, of course. It's easier if that exists in one space to orchestrate that. We want to enable Justin Smith's 3 hours of security vision here, where one of those major things is the ability to have a platform that rotates its own credentials without you knowing what those values are necessarily, because you don't care. They should just rotate themselves. And then, of course, things like credential age, going back to compliance concerns. If you want to make sure that you're assuring that your credentials are rotated on a regular basis, you need to know when you last generated those credentials. Logging, this is pretty straightforward. If you have a credential that exists in the world, you want to know who has access to that credential, who has access to it at any given point. One of the things that we've seen with some of the customers that we work with is a policy similar to like someone leaves the company, we need to rotate all the credentials that they had access to at a given point. So how do you do that if you don't know what they had access to? You could certainly rotate everything, but that's hard. So if you know what they had access to, you can only rotate those things, and that makes it easier. Of course, credential modification, if somebody changes something, you want to know who did it and when they did it. And access control changes. Of course, if you've got access control, you need to know who's setting up and changing your access control policies. All right, so then the last point that I'll touch on here is we wanted to get a real first-class open source integration that specifically integrates with Cloud Foundry. So one of the intentions here for the product is not necessarily to be the new be-all, end-all generic credential management solution. We're not aiming for that target. What we're aiming for is we see specific issues that customers are actually having in production in their CF deployment, and we want to analyze those issues and solve each of them in a really good and seamless way. We generally like to implement things without very specific implementation details, but we would rather it be a seamless solution than a completely generic tool. And of course, we do this by working with all the different CF teams. We're incredibly fortunate to be part of Credhub. So where we stand or sit downstairs, we've got quite a few different teams. And if we have an issue or a question with Bosch or Diego or any of the other dependent services, we can pretty easily just walk over and have a quick discussion about how we can make it a really good integration. All right, so a few anti-goals, and I feel like there should be further enumeration on this, but these are the only ones I could think of offhand. So the first one is Credhub is not and does not aspire to be an authentication provider. So one of the sort of hazy things about Credhub is it's a system that brokers access to credentials. So you could sort of jump to the conclusion that the thing that gives me access to my credentials is an authentication provider. That's not the case. Our authentication provider is and still will be for the indefinite future UAA. So if you're looking for something to validate credentials to broker authentication requests, that continues to be UAA, not Credhub. The other one is use cases outside the CF ecosystem. Like I said before, our time is limited and we've got a lot of things that a lot of problems that we can solve. So we're focusing those squarely on CF concerns. And then finally, it's not a magic bullet for all of your security concerns. I think we all know this, but it's something to call out. If your credentials are stored securely, that's great. But if you share an admin password with everyone in your organization and you put it on a sticky, it's not going to solve your problem. So it's one component of many components of a good and secure system. All right, so those are some of the product goals. One of the things that comes up, and I think it's a really natural question, is related to buy versus build, essentially. Like there exists a lot of credential management solutions out there. A lot of them are doing some really good things. So the question comes up: why build something from scratch as opposed to just wrapping one of the solutions that's generally accepted? So we went through, when this project first started, we went through a pretty good analysis to see if we could just use something that exists in the ecosystem or something that's out there. The main points that we fell back on are listed here, and some of the existing solutions wouldn't be able to accomplish all of these things. Some of them are pretty fundamental, like zero-touch operations. One of the things that Bosch sort of promises to us, especially if you pair Bosch with Concourse and like set it up in a very automated manner, is the idea of zero-touch operations. So we wanted to make sure that in this implementation, you didn't have to have an operator go in and set up all of your various components. It could be something that is capable of automation. The next one is related to security posturing. So one of the things that we do really well in CF is keep up with CVEs and security patches. Molly will certainly attest to this. As soon as we get any sort of notification of a CVE or any sort of critical vulnerability, it goes into our triage team. We analyze it, we get patches out, and we release that, often less than 48 hours after it comes out. And we wanted to have that same sort of posture with this tool. Like we sort of look at this as the central point of trust in the system, right? Like we're brokering access to credentials. So if that doesn't have good security policy, the things around it likely are not going to either. So we wanted to make sure that we could get a team that could patch anything that comes up as soon as we could. The next one is sort of an implementation detail, but it's something that was specifically requested by a lot of our customers, which is having agility for encryption options. So that could mean something like a hardware security module. It could mean something like GCP key management system or AWS key management system. Essentially, we get down to the idea of like, what do you trust? And different people have different answers to that. So we wanted to provide the ability to give some options in that regard. And specifically, like having an HSM client in an open source project is certainly rare. It's sort of seen as one of the upsells to a commercial product, but we wanted to make sure that we provided that in the open source. And then finally, this has sort of been alluded to with a lot of the other comments about being very specifically focused on Cloud Foundry concerns, but the ability to drive our roadmap based on requirements and information that we're gathering from our customers is really important to us. We want to make sure that we can implement all the things, or the most important things that are asked for, that add really good value without having to be reliant on a less flexible dependency. All right, before I jump into this, any questions about goals and motivations? I've been talking for quite a while, and this is a small group. Any questions? All right, everything's clear, crystal clear, great. Yes? The question was, how does Credhub differ from something like Vault? I think that's mainly a question of sort of this last slide, and also integrations, mainly. So we certainly want to integrate deeply with CF, which is achievable with something like Vault. You just have to write and maintain your wrappers yourself. An alternative implementation for Credhub could have been just those wrappers. But jumping back to, like, why did we build something new? We couldn't really achieve what we wanted to with that. All right, great. So talking about the implementation a little bit here. So looking at the architecture, one of the most obvious sort of separation of components. Hello? Uh-oh. Oh, dead battery, it says. Thank you for the helpful error message. All right, so looking at the architecture here. So we separated, the most obvious seam lines here are in the encryption provider, data store, and authentication provider. So the encryption provider interface is similar to what I was talking about for having agility for encryption providers and algorithms and implementations. So a sample encryption provider that we include is just a straightforward software-based AES encryption. It's sufficient for a lot of uses, but if that's not good for you, we also have a Luna HSM client. So if you have a hardware security module, you can offload the encryption functionality to the hardware and use that instead of a software-based solution. The data store, we chose to use relational data stores as our backend. We support MySQL and Postgres. We wanted to keep that sort of simple in light of some of the initiatives and other issues that CF at large has had with some like key value stores and other things. So we wanted to keep it relational and keep it simple. And then the authentication provider. We've got a couple supported authentication providers right now. The big one, the main one, of course, is UAA. So if you have an existing UAA, for example, with your Bosch director, we can reuse that for authentication with Credhub. And we've also got mutual TLS as an authentication option. So that we'll touch on how that's used a little bit later, but that's certificate-based authentication instead of token-based. All right, so we're going to jump into some demos, and Isabel will walk us through those. Just as a sort of setup with this, the way that we've sort of attacked the various problems that we could in the ecosystem that related to credential management is we decided to focus on some key workflows and use cases and sort of knock those out one at a time to make sure that we've got good solutions for each before we move on to the next thing. So the first one is related to Bosch Manifest credentials. This is the first screen in the previous slide about having credentials in plain text in your environment. So there are a lot of different various problems that we see with this. The solution that we came up with here is an integration with the Bosch director so that we can have a syntax, a double paren syntax, that it recognizes and works with us to interpolate those values only directly in time during the deployment when it needs to. So let's jump into demo, shall we? Yes.
Thank you. Can you all hear me well? Excellent. So apologies in advance if I'm not used to this laptop, so that may cause some interesting things at some point. So first off, we're going to start with the operator use case. So this is if you are an operator. At this point, we already have a director deployed. That's mostly because deploying a director takes about half an hour, and it's probably not the most interesting thing for you all to be watching. So we have a director deployed right now. It already has Credhub set up on it. That's co-located with the director itself, just on that base VM. And we are now going to be deploying concourse. So to start off with, it's also a bit harder to type with a mic, apparently. So we have a basic concourse manifest here. Can you all read the font well in the back? Awesome. So this is our manifest. You know, the top part, not most exciting. Most of you have probably seen a manifest like this before. Then we go down. Here we have this password that is just right there in the clear. So that's not the greatest. It's also maybe not the best password. You probably shouldn't have super secret as your password. A little bit guessable. We also further down have our TLS certificate and private key. Again, just right there in the clear. So this is just checked into your repo. It's just there sitting for someone to accidentally take. Oh, and here's another password. So first off, we're just going to deploy regularly. So if we just do, I'm holding that a second, please. Was conveniently already deployed. So if we go to the right URL, which is that? Yeah, excellent. So here's our concourse. Login, main, admin, super secret. There's our concourse. Hello world. So that's with our, just bog standard password in plain text manifest. If we now go in and replace the manifest with, replace the password rather with, hold on again.
Just attach it to your pocket.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you. So we have our password, our first off password in our manifest now templated with the special Bosch double paren syntax, just like this. And now if we go in and say Credhub, already set up like this and logged in. If we do Credhub set -n /auth password, let's expand that. So Credhub set -name auth password. This is a password. And the value is going to be still just super secret, not our best password, but oh. We now have our password right there in Credhub. So we can go back to the manifest. Oops, already deployed that. And if we now redeploy, here, it does currently say that there is a change in the manifest. That's the Bosch thing that they're working on. But notice that it is now redacted. And if we say, yes, let's continue and deploy, it's going to be a no-op deployment because even despite the change that it claimed there was above, that was just the same password. Nothing changed. It was just a no-op deployment. But now the manifest is stored securely, or the password rather. So we can go back in. Notice that concourse is still working, and admin super secret. We can still log in. So that was that first password. What if we want to improve the password? Maybe let's instead generate a nice, randomized password. So if we say down in our manifest, we can add the variables section. So in here we can say name. Call it auth password, type is password, and we can parameterize this a bit. The default length for passwords in Credhub is 20 characters, so it's nice and long already. 20, right? Not 30? 30, even better. Yes. Then that is going to actually generate a password using Credhub. We need to make one small change up here where currently our variable name is prepended with a slash. We want to remove that. And I'm just going to kick off the deployment while I explain that. So again, change this time, it really did change. And while it's updating, so we now have a password that's namespaced in Credhub. So if we do Credhub find, there are a lot of credentials there. Credhub find dash P. Let's just do this. Let's go with that. Bosch. So our Bosch manifest, our concourse manifest is now using this auth password here, and you'll see that it's namespaced with the director name and the deployment name. It also has an ID, so that way if you want to change the password, and Credhub does store historical values of any credential, then Bosch knows which version you're supposed to be using. So that way, you have your deployment pinned to the right version of the credential. The GUID will shift. So if I can actually show you right now. So if I do Credhub regenerate this same password, then I have a new password. And if I redeploy,
yes, the idea there's the name is generally what you use with the credential, but the name is actually not the unique resource identifier. It's just a collection of versions of that credential.
So if I have a list of former passwords, I at least have two.
So, and just to reiterate, this password is not a password that someone is about to guess. It's not quite the same as the super secret password before. So you can copy that password, and again, go to concourse. Let's log out because I'm still logged in. Admin, new password, and we are still able to log in. Any more questions?
So you can use Credhub to print password.
Yes, you can. Pardon? That you can get Credhub to print passwords for you. So you can. You can also, for example, type things to less if you don't want them there. Does that answer your question?
Well, it's more that I don't want the operators.
Yeah, it is sort of a different thing. Like there is a world in which operators do not have any interaction with Credhub. They deploy their manifests that have references in them. They get generated and stored, but they don't actually have access to go get those things.
Oh, so this is like a super admin.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's certainly possible that an operator would be access to these things, but in the cases where they don't, we can restrict it so that they don't.
This one is just a very basic director. So we have that. We can now also replace that TLS key as well as the other password. So if we go back to our manifest, then down here in the variables, we want to add, let's say, TLS cert. This is a certificate value credential. And this one also has some options. Because it's a certificate, it needs to be signed by a CA that we already trust, ideally. So we are going to say CA, Team CA, I think is what we want. Excellent. Capital A? Excellent. And let's also give it a common name. So we want to give it our IP as common name, as well as an alternative name. And again, deploy that. And I did not use the certificate. So if we go back up here, then we can say in here for the certificate, TLS cert.certificate. The vertical bar syntax we actually don't still need because the vertical bar syntax was just there for the multi-line. And since it's just now single line, we don't need it. Yes, thank you.
So one thing to call out is that one of the things that you notice as well as adding the variables. So each of the variables is typed. The reason that we went with the type system is just to make generation a lot easier. With the certificate, like you see with the references there, the manifest actually is still just accepting a certificate string value for TLS under cert. But we actually have this larger object, the certificate object, that has both the certificate and the private key values associated. So when referencing those, you have to use a dot syntax to access only the specific value that you need. If your release is set up appropriately, you can state that. But if it's opinionated about the key names by using something like TLS under cert, you would need to use the dot sensors.
Yeah, so for some releases and jobs, you can get away with things like TLS cert, or just TLS, depending on what you want to name it. And then you don't need to add the dot certificate, dot private key, and so on. It just is able to pick up everything from that whole certificate. So yeah. I think, do you know if the Concourse release has that for an example?
I don't think so.
Can't think of any releases off the top of my head that have it.
Credhub.
That's a good point.
We dog food our own stuff because, of course, we have it.
So my next question is, what is the mature workflow? We used to use what we used to use password generator and operations. What was our last pass? We used to use last pass CLI. So you're doing a workflow that's similar to that.
Yeah, I think the workflow will show how CF deployment does it. It's
For the developer, I mean, like, okay, we did this today. I'm going to use this for the next 4 months. Let's see how I would operate with Molly points. I don't want to operate with this. Right? How is Molly on a team using it?
Yeah, so it would depend. If Molly needs access to those values for any reason, you would generally set up like a UAA configuration to include her identity and the team's identity. so that they can have unique logins and be able to access them.
We have let's realize.
Right.
UAA.
Yep.
We just generated a new certificate. Where in this
Right there with the certificate. Sure, so the question was that we just generated a certificate. Where does the private key live? So we generated both a certificate and its private key. And those both live together in Credhub. As the super user, I can show it to you in Credhub. So you can go back to that Bosch variables and grab the credential name. So I can do Credhub get -n the certificate, and you see both the private key and the certificate. And yeah, to reiterate, currently I'm logged into Credhub as the super user.
It's the CA, the sign of CA. No, so we don't currently support CSR generated signed workflows. It's all single requests within Credhub.
It's not the most pleasant. Yeah, it's not the most pleasant. But we have our CA, we have our certificate, and our private key all here. And now if we go back to Concourse, it's still working because it's still signed by that same by the same CA, even though the certificate has changed. And we should have, yeah.
You actually have to do developer tools. Yeah, these days they moved it. Right.
So issued by the Credhub CA, the certificate is valid, and you can look at the details. If I can click it. Yeah. We can also do things like specify how long the certificate's going to live, all of that stuff. So we could say, oh, we only want the certificate for a day, for example. The default is for a year. Same with the length. We could say that we wanted a 4096-bit certificate. All that stuff is configurable. Just with that same.
Is there timing of that? Is there also rotation period?
That's a good question. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we don't currently do any automated rotation of certificates or credentials. We're sort of, that is definitely on the near-term roadmap, but as it exists today, your rotation mechanism, it helps that it's a reference, but you do still need to go in there, initiate the rotation of the value.
So we have our Concourse now. Now has the safe securely stored certificate and auth password. And if we look at if we actually grab the manifest from Bosch. Oops.
It's just manifest. They changed it.
Then you'll see that it again is just stored with a template like this. No actual password or certificate stored. If you actually go into the Bosch database and dig around, it again is just stored like that. So Bosch does not know about the real thing.
Yeah, so this is a really important thing to call out because all of this other stuff certainly can be achieved with a simple generator and a Swift template. One of the differences with this integration is Bosch is actually aware of this, so it can request these values on demand. So it doesn't actually need to store any of this stuff anymore. So it just has a reference. If it goes through and it needs to recreate at the end, or it needs to scale or do anything it needs, it'll just grab the value appropriately at the appropriate time.
There's no corner cases right now.
There are no known corner cases. 262 should support all of the things, cross links, and all of that craziness.
So Bosch can describe the
Right.
So how does it work
Yeah, so that's The question was, how does an application credential workflow work with this? So we're going to go over that in a second. The short answer is there's going to be a separate instance. So there's one Credhub that is associated to platform credentials, which lives on Bosch Director, and there's a separate installation of Credhub in the actual platform deployment that is for use of services and applications.
There was a question in the back. Oh, excellent. So just a quick segue. The actual director manifest is pretty similar to what it is normally. You have your director, blob store, and so on. There's UAA in here. We also have Credhub co-located on here. That's not the one I wanted. There we go. There's the co-located Credhub job. And then the main special thing to make the director aware of Credhub is config server up here. So in your director job properties area, you just add the config server, enables true, add the URL of the Credhub CA, UAA off, and so on. And then if you look at your Bosch environment, you can verify that it knows about your config server. It just says config server enabled, and you know that you are good to go. Any questions about that?
Looks like there's a bootstrap problem there. How do you know you initially deploy?
There's a bootstrap problem. When dealing with credentials, there's always a bootstrap problem. So the solution for the bootstrap problem is Bosch create env or Bosch init creates the very first VM that exists in the environment. So
I know what you're talking about.
was that incorrect?
No, it's right. No, the bootstrap problem is the same. Solve the same.
Right.
All other bootstrap problems.
Right, exactly. So we sort of lessen the amount of time that the bootstrap problem exists by being a party on the first VM in the environment. But generally, the recommended way to generate the credentials to deploy the director that has Credhub is to use the Bosch 2 CLI features, which will generate it, put it in a file. You should store that file somewhere safe because you shouldn't need too much access to it, and then use Credhub for everything else.
The manifest I'm looking at right now is just one of our sample manifests in the Credhub release repo. So here you can see the variables section where we use Bosch to generate the variables and, as Dan said, store them not in Credhub, but somewhere that you can hopefully secure them.
It includes either the encryption key, or if you're super paranoid about it, you can use a HSM, and that will only include configuration details to access it, not the actual key that's used to encrypt it.
So that is our Bosch director manifest. And again, not going to actually go through the steps of deploying it because we'd be here for quite some time. But that's basically the operator workflow. Do we have any questions about the operator workflow before I move on to the developer workflow?
Sorry, just one thing I missed just on the screen. So you're watching your manifest, that's good at
That was, so the sample manifest was in the Credhub release. Oh, the question was about where that.
I guess my question, when you deploy the Bosch director, you take the Credhub release and deploy it at the same time.
Oh, okay, right, that's right.
Yes.
It's supported in PCF.
Yes. 1.11 is where it started support. Yeah.
I feel like I have to address them all as an operator. I don't want anything to do with credentials. I want the most deniability I can get. Instant level deniability.
So the developer workflow now.
Do we want to quickly look at the
CF deployment? Sure.
Yeah, so we obviously went through a very naive implementation of this with a concourse manifest. The question is, like, how does this actually scale to production deployment? So it's a very easy thing to answer because we've got this new solution, which is CF deployment, which should be the canonical, like, compatible view of CF deployment with the latest bits. And it includes all of the things that you need to use Credhub with this deployment. So the variable section is crazy long. Oh no, you wanted to just pull up the straight manifest.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got the whole variable structure here. So a lot of passwords, those you don't really care about, but the interesting thing comes in where you've got this like CA structure built in, so you can declare CAs that are generated, and then have a hierarchy of other certificates that are signed by the CAs that you created. And you can establish all this structure in a manifest that you check into CI, or you check into version control, and not have to actually worry about it. So I can grab this manifest with my Credhub enabled director, deploy it. It's going to generate 60 credentials with the CA structure and all of that stuff, and it just works.
The variable section was about 300 or 400 lines long. So there are a fair number of credentials in there.
Is there anything else to this? I mean, credentials is important, and they're not used because they're important.
I'm not aware of any, but I could certainly be wrong.
So for those of you who haven't used CF deployment before, it's pretty straightforward. If we just go to their README, basically just do like Bosh deploy -d CF deployment. You need one variable that you pass in from the CLI generally. Oops. Somewhere they have it. Got your bubble. Basically like this. So you just pass in the manifest. You supply your system domain, and then however many ops files that you want. So we have an ops file for Credhub that should be merged in soon. And it just adds Credhub like this. So it grabs the most recent release of Credhub and updates. It adds the instance group for Credhub.
I don't like seeing Charles on there.
Talk to Bosh about that. No problem.
It adds another database for Credhub. Credhub just has its own database in there, another MySQL database by default. And then it also adds instance identities on Diego. So this is a new Diego feature. I don't want to say too much about it because I might misspeak, and Eric PM is sitting right there. But basically, Diego now supports mutual TLS by putting certificates on app cells. And we will be seeing more of that in a moment, but this just ensures that it happens.
I can actually, do you want to switch to the slides? I can do a quick intro of what we're going to look at next. So that's the application workflow.
Oh.
You can stay there, I'll be quick. So everything that we've talked about so far has been specific to this operator deployment workflow. So Bosh manifests, getting your credentials out of the manifest and generating them automatically and all of that stuff. So the second use case that we've got here is related to application concerns. So specifically, the first thing that we're working with is service credentials. So when you bind your application to a service, it needs credentials from the service to be able to access it. So there are a few problems with that. One of them is just by its nature, having environment variables, having credentials in your environment variables increases the likelihood that it can be leaked, because you often dump the environment, you put those in logs, you ship those logs somewhere else, and then they become public. So it's easy to disclose that way. And then also there's just this idea that we don't want to transit credentials between various components that don't actually need access to the credential. So if we can limit it to only the ones that need access, it makes it a lot harder for us to accidentally disclose it. And then things sort of next step concerns about rotating those credentials without actually recreating an application, and access control, of course. So the solution that we've got, let me just start with this very confusing workflow and make sure that you all understand it. So this is what happens today when you bind an application to a service. You hit Cloud Controller, it delegates over to the service broker and says, bind to this application to this service. The service broker creates a credential in the service. That service returns it back, and the service broker then returns back to Cloud Controller, which goes to Diego, and that gets put into the application environment. So that's the current workflow. The lighter colored numbers there are sort of the transit of the credentials between the various components. So that's how it exists today. To make this workflow more confusing, to add more boxes to it, we've decided to introduce Credhub into this. So it does actually simplify things quite a bit. It's the existing workflow as it is today, with just one more step. So instead of the service broker getting those credentials back from the service and then transiting them back through the environment, it just writes those credentials into the Credhub instance. And then instead of passing back the credential value, it passes back a reference. Again, just using one of our credential names as a reference. And then that actually gets placed into the application environment. And then the final step is when the application needs it, it just requests it directly from Credhub. We get some good things with the last part, which is when the application needs it, it just asks for it. The main thing is we have an actual interaction that we can authorize. Like we have this notion of who Act 1 is, so we can authorize directly that it is Act 1 making this request, and they have access to the credential that exists in Credhub based on access control. And also we can use mutual TLS to enforce that, so that it's not just sort of a basic auth interaction to get access to another password. Yes?
What is the actual mechanism? So the mechanism used to be there's a plain text password in an environment,
Right.
What is the other mechanism?
The question is, how does the app get the credential? So that's a good question. Our good friends at Spring have these things called Spring connectors, which basically do the manual work of parsing VCAP services into your application environment. They basically just extended that to be aware of this situation.
Spring framework is the only framework you can do that in?
Spring framework is the easiest because it's totally transparent to you. We're also working with Steel Toe to also make it similarly transparent. And then from there, I mean, anyone can implement this because authentication credentials exist. There's a known address that the application knows. You can make a request. You can do it with curl. We don't yet have library support for anything other than Spring and Steel Toe.
In the workflow, did you look at just dumping everything into Credhub so that you don't transit the circle?
Yeah, it's a good question. We thought about that. The furthest we got is right now we're dumping everything that exists in the credentials key of VCAP services. So you don't have to like parse each thing for a credential. You can just throw the entire JSON object. But we are not doing the entire thing because that would sort of break the existing service broker contracts.
Yeah, there's a huge value to actually having auditability involved with that beginning of time on all things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a web service essentially that you're sending this out to. The key you're sending to the application. You're sending that to credit. That mechanism is documented, so that part of the
Yeah, so as far as using this specific workflow for another language, we documented how we implemented it with Spring so that you could follow the steps with any other language. The specific question of how do you get access to the instance identity credentials, that is something that Diego's documented, and we've also got some documentation on our website that shows you how to enable those.
Was there a question back there?
All right, so I think that is pretty much it. The last thing is related to access control. So one of the things that I didn't talk about was the service broker sets the credential in Credhub. It also sets access control so that if a different app tried to access the credential, it wouldn't be able to do it because of access control. All right, let's demo, shall we? Yes.
If I wanted to do this outside of the scope of a service where I inject the credentials into Credhub, they have a form of it. Something else that I want to have a user from the service so that I can access it. That explored how I go out.
Yeah, so we haven't explored that yet. We haven't gotten into user-provided services or service keys yet. Right now, it's strictly for the service binding workflow. Yeah, it's definitely another solution.
Any more questions? So we're now going to move on to the fortune teller app, which has anyone seen the fortune teller app? It's one of the sample Spring apps. You've seen it? Excellent. Okay, so it's a pretty straightforward Spring app. It also is able to connect to Spring to service brokers. So I don't actually know exactly what it uses myself, but I think probably a MySQL database, something like that. It's pretty just kind of bog standard sample app. So we have our own very, very, very minimally tweaked version of it. That did not work a moment ago, and it did not work just now either. But basically, we have we've just modified. This is probably easier to show on GitHub. Spring. So there's just a branch here on the official fortune teller app. Can you all see that? Excellent. So if you just look at the difference that has been added on this branch, basically there's just a CF target that was more specific, and actually that one, ignore that one. But basically, we just have added some dependencies into the POM XML for this particular app, and basically those are just the just the Spring Credhub connector and just the cloud connector, and this is the additional repo that we need to add in order to grab those particular libraries. But this is what changed in order to get fortune teller working with Credhub. So from there, we can now run. We can just run the PCF create services command, and that is just going to create some services. That takes a moment.
And these are asynchronous services. So
yes. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going no. While that is doing its thing, we can just watch. They're still being created. But basically, while that's happening, we can SSH onto the app, CF SSH fortune teller. Oh. We do not yet have the app because the services are still being created. Sure.
As well as to struggle with my computer's auto-complete settings.
If you want to learn some new shortcuts, Dan has some very nifty ones that I am not that familiar with. I lost SSH. There we go. Go for it. No dumb questions.
Yes. Yeah, you can generate and store SSHs.
So we are just tailing the logs on the left. That looks a bit funky when it is blown up in a nice big font. But basically here you just have some requests. So if I, those have now succeeded, but just really quickly, I can show you like Credhub get, let's get something that does not exist. And we have, should have, we don't have that.
Oh, you're making a request to the director.
Oh, that's a different Credhub. That would explain that. If I knew the API of this Credhub, then I could show you, but I actually don't know it off the top of my head. Therefore, I will not show it to you. But now we can now.
So we're not really opinionated about that. Generally, like it should be as restricted as you can. So if you only need it for internal applications, you can route it to a local address. If you have external services that are going to hit it, or external service brokers, stuff like that, you would have to have it externally run.
It seems like by default,
Right. Right.
So I'm going to push the app, and on the left side here, I'm just tailing those Credhub logs. We're uploading. And we now start seeing some logs in Credhub here, because as we are starting the app, it's making the service brokers are hitting Credhub in order to get the variables for this app. And in a few moments, it should have finished deploying, and then we can jump on and can show you some other interesting things in there.
Yeah, so you'll actually see in the logs there are two separate interactions. One of them is a put, and I recognize that these logs are sort of bad for viewing this. It's just sort of a very basic way to show the traffic in the demo. But so the puts are actually coming from the service broker because it's actually setting those credentials that need to be protected in Credhub. And then the interpolate requests after the fact for the application reaching out to Credhub with mutual TLS. Excuse me. So it is reaching out to the app with mutual TLS and getting the credential value from Credhub directly.
So these are the interpolate requests that Dan just mentioned, and they're post requests because the body contains the BCAP services payload uninterpolated, and get requests don't allow bodies. So looks like the app is almost finished.
Yeah, so it's this sample application deploys a server MBUI that speak via Spring Cloud services. So there's a config server, a circuit breaker, and some sort of discovery that I forget. All the Spring Cloud services goodness.
Taking a little while. I think it needs to download a fair number of dependencies. Maven. Oh, almost there.
So is the application going to mutual TLS from the VM?
Yeah, it's from the app container. Yeah, so the Diego, when it stages the app, places those credentials in the app container. It's actually on a 10FS memory mount, so that it's persistent to disk. But it provides those certificates, those credentials. It also does automatic rotation on them. So you could set it to like a lifetime of 1 hour, and each hour Diego will add a new valid credential to your container.
Does it rotate?
No, so it doesn't need to because it can replace those in line. Yeah.
So it now is successfully deployed, and I've SSH'd onto the app, and we can look at the app and check out VCAP services. So if I do just echo VCAP services, let's type that through, something that makes it a bit more readable, or not. If we, usually it isn't necessary. Usually not necessary. So you see here that there's the credentials and then Credhub ref, and that's been replaced with the same sort of syntax that the Bosch manifest uses, where normally you'd have a giant blob of credentials. Now you just have this reference, and this is what it actually sent to Credhub on the left here in the interpolate request. And yeah, I used that in order to just grab the, basically it sent all of the VCAP services, and Credhub found these and just interpolated them with the relevant credentials. So if we looked this, if I had access to the Credhub and looked this up, then we'd see a blob of credentials that are completely obscured to me on the container here right now. And we also can see in our env, we can see the CF instance cert location. So that is the certificate that Diego puts on there for mutual TLS, as well as, I think there's the cert, there's the key, there's the GUID. So if we look at the search, somewhere in here we should see, we see this organization unit is app : the app GUID, and that is how Credhub knows which app we are talking to. Any questions there? Yes, that's the app workflow. And to reiterate from before, Spring has this made very easy. I mean, it was literally just adding the libraries, but for other languages, you could do something similar. Other languages, pardon?
All right, that's.
Yes, I have a question. Is it possible to enable the operator workflow without using the developer workflow?
Yes. Yeah, so you can just deploy your Bosch director with Credhub on it and leave that at. All right, last thing, I'll just show the wrap-up slide here. And I can send out these slides as well, but all of this stuff is available now. So on the Bosch director side, you can use whatever you usually use to deploy the Bosch director. It's supported with Credhub version 1 and above, and Bosch version 262 and above. And the service credential workflow, we've got what we're calling an MVP release of that in the edge release of 1.1x of Credhub. And if you use CF deployment to deploy your CF environment, you can see that there's going to be an ops file in there shortly that configures this all for you. So that is it. We're open source, so Google us, look at our repos, submit any issues, or let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.